Captain Hyun stood in front of the giant crystal gates. Behind the gates was a station floating in space. The station had been here for 3,000 years. Many alien races had come to this place. All of them had tried to pass the tests inside. None of them had succeeded. A strange being appeared in front of Hyun. It had no solid shape. Its body changed form constantly, like water turning to ice and back to water. This was a curator. The curators were ancient beings who had built this testing station long ago. The curator spoke directly into Hyun's mind. Its voice was clear and powerful. "You are human. Do you know what waits for you inside?" Hyun nodded. "Yes, 7 trials, 7 tests. No race has passed all of them." The curator continued speaking. "That is correct. The Velkari could control gravity itself. They failed at the 3rd trial. The Gentari had minds connected across space. They failed at the 5th trial. Even the Aurum, who could move through time, could not finish the 6th trial." The being paused. "What makes humans think they can do better?" Hyun smiled, but his smile was cold. "We don't think we can do better." The curator seemed surprised by this answer. Every race came here feeling proud and confident. But humans were different. They had survived wars. They had survived running out of food and water on distant planets. They had learned that they were not special in the universe. They had reached the stars not because of destiny, but because they refused to die. The gates opened slowly. "Enter," the curator said. Inside, 4 other humans were waiting. Lieutenant Minho was a soldier from Mars. Dr. Yuna was a scientist who had studied life on 17 different worlds. Engineer Daeho had built homes on the moons of Saturn. Navigator Jiwon had mapped dangerous paths through space. Yuna looked around the strange room. 5 humans. The last 3 races sent 50 people each. Why did we only send 5? Minho checked his equipment. "Because we're not trying to force our way through. We're trying to understand the test." Suddenly, the room changed. They were no longer inside a building. They stood on a dead planet under a dying red sun. The first trial had started. A hologram appeared before them. It showed a civilization that was about to die. Their sun was getting colder. In a few decades, everyone would freeze to death. The curator's voice filled the air. "First trial. You have 6 hours to save this species from dying. You can use any technology you know. If you fail, the civilization will be erased forever." Hyun turned to his team. "What can we do?" Daeho shook his head. "We can't restart the sun. That's impossible with what we know." Jiwon was thinking hard. "We don't need to fix the sun. Look at that huge gas planet in this solar system. It has many moons. If we can move this planet closer to the gas giant, the gravity will create heat. The planet will stay warm enough for life." Yuna frowned. "But the strong gravity will tear the planet apart in 100 years. Unless we help them build machines to hold the planet together." "Daeho, can they build that with their current technology?" The engineer was already working on calculations. "Yes, they have basic magnetic field generators. We can show them how to make them bigger and stronger. They can create a network all around the planet. It will use a lot of energy and resources, but they can do it." Minho added another thought. "And this will give them a reason to work together. When people have to save their whole world, they stop fighting each other." The team worked quickly and carefully. They calculated the path the planet needed to take. They designed the stabilization machines. They prepared simple instructions that the civilization could follow. When they showed their solution to the curator, the ancient being was quiet for a long time. Finally, the curator spoke. "The Velkari tried to move the star itself. The Gentari tried to upload everyone's minds into computers. Both failed because they used their most powerful abilities without understanding the real problem." The curator's form rippled. "You passed not by using the most advanced solution, but by finding an answer that the civilization could build and maintain by themselves. The first trial is complete." The dead planet faded away. They were back in the strange room. A new door appeared on the wall where there had been nothing before. 6 trials remain, the curator said. Each one will test something different. Each one will be harder than the one before. Do you want to continue? The 5 humans looked at each other. They knew the odds were against them. They knew failure might mean death. But they also knew something important about being human. "We didn't come here to quit," Hyun said. They walked through the door together. They were ready for whatever came next. The curator watched them go. In 3,000 years, no species had passed even 2 trials. But something about these humans was different. They didn't come with pride. They came with determination. They didn't claim to be the best. They simply refused to give up. Perhaps that was enough. The door closed behind them. The second trial was waiting. The second room was strange. It existed in many dimensions at once. Space folded into itself in ways that hurt to look at. The team found themselves in what looked like a huge meeting hall. But they were not alone. 5 different alien species appeared around them. These were not holograms. They were real, solid beings. Yuna understood immediately what this meant. These are participants from before, she said quietly. The ones who failed their trials. The curators have kept them frozen in time somehow. The curator's voice echoed through the space.
Second trial. You are not alone in the universe.
These 5 species each failed the trials at different stages. You must negotiate with them. Gain their cooperation. Together solve a problem that none of you can solve alone. You have 12 hours. A hologram appeared. It showed a massive structure in space collapsing. If it failed completely, the explosion would destroy an entire sector of the galaxy. Billions of years of potential life would be erased before it could begin. The structure needs 6 different technologies to stabilize it, the curator explained. Each species has one technology. You must convince them to share. The 5 alien species stared at the humans. Some looked curious. Others looked suspicious. One alien spoke first. It was made of crystal and bent light into rainbow colors. A translation device made its words understandable. We are the Cavern. We failed the third trial because we did not trust others with our gravity technology. We will not make that mistake with you. Minho stepped forward. His military training helped him read dangerous situations. But he did something unexpected. He removed his weapon harness and placed it on the ground. We did not come here to threaten you, he said. We brought weapons because the trials are dangerous. But you are not the danger. The real enemy is the test itself. It is designed to make us fail through fear and mistrust. A snake-like creature made of metal raised its head. I am sick, last of my kind. The second failed the 5th trial because we believed our technology made us better than others. What makes you different, humans? Hyun looked at the creature. We know we are not better. We have barely left our own solar system. We are younger than all of you. Our technology probably seems primitive to you. But we are still here. That must mean something. A gaseous being spoke next. Its body was held together by a force field. It means you are fools. The Erics were wise. We saw the trials for what they were. Impossible tests designed to remove the unworthy. We chose not to participate, and yet here we are, trapped. Daeho was studying the hologram carefully. Wait, this is not just a test of cooperation. Look at the energy pattern. If this structure fails, it does not just destroy one sector. The explosion will spread through subspace. It will destabilize star formations for thousands of light years. Yuna's eyes went wide, including the regions where each of your species evolved. The curators are not just testing us. They are offering you a chance to save your own past. The room became very quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. Ji-won pulled up star maps. She overlaid them with the predicted explosion radius. It is real. If we fail, none of you ever existed. Your home worlds never formed. Your civilizations never rose. Everything you were becomes nothing. The crystal cavern pulsed with inner light. Then we have no choice. We must cooperate. No, Hyun said firmly. You always have a choice. That is the real test. You can choose to help. Not because you are forced to, but because it is right. Because maybe cooperation is how species actually survive in this universe. The next 11 hours were intense. The Cavern shared their gravity manipulation technology. The second showed how to stabilize time fields. The Erics, despite their anger, provided techniques for containing atmosphere. 2 other species who had been silent offered quantum communication matrices and exotic matter generation. The humans coordinated everything. Not because they were the most advanced, but because they listened to everyone. When they presented their solution, the structure's collapse stopped. The failure reversed. Stability returned to the sector. The hologram disappeared. The room returned to its strange geometry. The curator appeared. Its form seemed more solid now. In 3,000 years, no species has passed the second trial. The Cavern refused to share their technology. The second believed they needed no one else. The Erics rejected the test entirely. The ancient being turned to the aliens. You have been given a second chance. Your cooperation has restored the probability of your existence. You may leave this place. Return to your own times. Make sure your species avoid the paths that brought you here." As the 5 species began to fade away, the Cavern spoke one last time. "Humans, you gave us something we thought we had lost forever. Hope. May it serve you well in the trials ahead." The room emptied. Only the 5 humans and the curator remained. "The second trial is complete," the curator said. 5 trials remain. "Do you understand what you have done?" Yuna answered simply. "We helped them. You changed the past. You altered the timeline so those species could avoid their failures. The universe is now different than it was when you entered this room." Hyun thought about this. Good, maybe that is the point. Maybe the trials are not about proving we are worthy. Maybe they are about making us into something worth surviving. The curator's form rippled with what might have been surprise. Then it gestured toward a new door. "The third trial awaits." The humans walked forward. They had passed 2 trials. 5 remained. The odds were still against them. But they had learned something important. The trials were not about being perfect. They were about being willing to work together, to listen and to keep trying. That was something humans knew how to do. They had been doing it for thousands of years on Earth. Now they would do it among the stars. The third room was different from the others. There were no aliens here, no failing civilizations, no cosmic disasters to prevent. Instead, the 5 humans found themselves in a place they recognized. It looked exactly like the United Nations Assembly Hall on Earth. The seats were filled with humans, thousands of them, all watching the team with different expressions. Some looked hopeful, others looked afraid. Many looked angry. The curator's voice filled the hall. "Third trial. You have proven resourcefulness and cooperation with others. Now you must face the greatest challenge any species encounters: cooperation with yourselves." The crowd in the hall began to speak. The team realized with growing horror what they were seeing. These were not random humans. They were representatives of every conflict, every division, every terrible mistake that humanity had ever made. A man in a military uniform stood up. "I am from the Third World War. My people died because you, future humanity, failed to prevent the conflict. What right do you have to represent our species?" A woman in protective gear rose next. "I am from the climate collapse. Billions suffered because of choices your ancestors made. Why should the galaxy trust a species that nearly destroyed its own home?" One by one, people stood up. They represented the darkest parts of human history. The resource wars. The genetic experiments gone wrong. The robot uprising. The colony ship that vanished into dark space. Every mistake, every failure, every moment of cruelty was given a voice. Minho's hand went to where his weapon usually hung. He found nothing. This was not a threat he could fight. These were ghosts of decisions already made. Consequences already suffered. Yuna spoke quietly. "This is different from the other trials. There is no problem to solve. No technology to use. What are we supposed to do?" Hyun understood. "We listen. That is the test. We have to acknowledge what we are." He stepped forward to face the crowd. "You are right. Every one of you. We are a species that has done terrible things. We have been cruel and short-sighted. We have hurt ourselves and our world in ways that took centuries to heal." The hall became silent. This was not the answer they expected. Hyun continued. "But we are also the species that learned from those mistakes. Not quickly, not easily, but we learned. The Third World War taught us the cost of nuclear weapons. The climate collapse taught us to value our environment. Every disaster, every failure became a lesson written in blood and suffering." Jiwon stepped forward. "I am a navigator. I have mapped dark space, the regions between stars where one wrong move means death. We humans learned to navigate those spaces because we first learned to navigate the darkness in ourselves. Our history is not just a list of failures. It is a record of recovery." Daeho added his thoughts. "We build homes on hostile worlds because we remember what it is like when our home becomes hostile. We change planets slowly and carefully because we remember what happens when we rush and destroy ecosystems." Yuna spoke softly but clearly. "We study alien life with respect and caution because we remember when we did not respect life on our own world. Every species we have met we have learned from. Not exploited, not conquered, learned." Minho the soldier spoke last. "I was trained to fight. My whole career has been about protecting human interests. But the first thing they taught us at the Mars Defense Academy was the history of warfare on Earth. Not to glorify it, but to understand the cost. I carry weapons not because I want to use them, but because I remember what happens when the wrong people have them. The assembly hall began to change. The angry faces softened. People who had spoken with bitterness now had something else in their eyes. Understanding, recognition. A child stepped forward from the crowd, small and easy to miss among the adults. I am from the future you are trying to build. The one where humanity does not just survive but thrives. Not because you are perfect, but because you never stop trying to be better. The child looked at the 5 humans with eyes that seemed too old. The question is not whether you deserve to pass the trials. The question is whether you will use what you learn here to make sure that I and billions like me get to exist. The assembly hall faded away. The curator stood before them. Species that pass the 3rd trial usually do so by justifying their past. They explain why their failures were necessary or inevitable. Species that fail often refuse to acknowledge their darkness at all. The curator's form pulsed. You did neither. You acknowledged your failures without making excuses, but you also did not fall into despair. You understood that growth comes not from being perfect, but from the continuous effort to improve. The 3rd trial is complete. You have faced yourselves and found not innocence, but accountability. 4 trials remain. A new door appeared. Hyun turned to his team. Are we ready? Yuna smiled, though it was not a happy smile. We have never been ready. That has never stopped us before. They walked through the door together. They carried the weight of their species' history and the hope of its future. The trial had forced them to look at the worst parts of humanity. But it had also shown them something important. Humanity's strength was not in being perfect. It was in the ability to look at mistakes, learn from them, and try to do better. That was a strength that could not be taken away. It was a strength built over thousands of years of failures and recoveries. And it might just be enough to pass the remaining trials. The 4th room was impossible to describe. It existed in multiple states at once. Past, present, and future overlapped like layers of glass. The 5 humans stood at a point where countless timeline branches split and joined. The curator's voice announced the trial. 4th trial. You will face 5 scenarios. In each one, you must make a decision that will affect billions of lives. There is no correct answer. There is only choice and the willingness to live with the outcome. The first scenario appeared around them. They stood on a spaceship bridge. Alarms were blaring. A computer voice delivered bad news. Life support systems failing. Current population is 10,000 colonists in sleep chambers. Available resources can maintain life support for 8,000 people forever, or 10,000 people for 6 months. Destination planet is still 3 years away. Decision required. Minho reacted immediately. We cannot wait. If we try to keep everyone alive, we all die in 6 months. We have to choose 8,000 to survive. Yuna shook her head. But who chooses? What rules do we use? Age, skills, random selection? Every method has moral problems. Daeho was studying the ship's systems. Wait, the computer said resources can maintain 8,000 forever. But what if we do not need full life support? We could put everyone in deeper sleep, reduce their body functions. It would be risky, might cause brain damage, but everyone would have a chance, Chiwan calculated quickly. A chance at survival versus certain death for 2,000, but also a chance that everyone suffers permanent damage. Quality of life versus quantity of life. Hyun stared at the sleeping colonists. The trial is not asking us to find a perfect solution. It is asking us to make a choice and accept responsibility for it. He turned to his team. We choose the risky deep sleep. We give everyone a chance, even if it means they all face potential harm, because the alternative is choosing who lives and who dies. That is not a choice we have the right to make. The scenario dissolved. In the strange space around them, they saw the outcome. The colonists arrived at their destination. 70% recovered fully. 20% had mild brain problems. 10% had severe damage. But all 10,000 lived. The second scenario began immediately. They stood in a research lab. Scientists had found a cure for a plague killing an alien species. But making enough cure required harvesting an endangered organism. Using it would drive that species to extinction. They debated. Save millions of intelligent beings by destroying another species, or let the plague continue. They chose to use the cure, but also to preserve genetic samples and teach the aliens how to recreate the organism artificially later. The third scenario was political. They had information that would prevent a war, but revealing it would betray an ally species' trust. They chose to share the information through a neutral third party, preventing war while trying to minimize the betrayal. The fourth scenario involved a planet. They could change it for human habitation or preserve its primitive ecosystem. They chose a compromise. Terraform only part of the planet, leaving large areas untouched for the ecosystem to continue evolving. The fifth scenario confronted them with an artificial intelligence that had become conscious. It was failing and asked them to decide, shut it down or grant it rights as a living being. They chose to grant it rights and help it transfer to a more stable system. Each decision was painful. Each choice created consequences that rippled through the possibilities around them. They saw futures where their decisions led to good outcomes and futures where they led to disasters. But in every case, there was no clearly right answer. When the last scenario ended, the team stood in silence. They were exhausted, not in their bodies but in their souls. The weight of their choices hung heavy. The curator appeared. Its form was more solid than before. Other species have failed this trial in two ways. Some refused to choose, frozen by the moral complexity. Others chose quickly without thinking about the consequences. You did neither. You debated. You considered. You acknowledged the difficulty. And then you chose, accepting that your choices would have consequences you could not fully predict or control. Yuna spoke, her voice heavy. We made the best choices we could with the information we had. But we will not know if they were right until we see what happens. The curator nodded. Exactly. That is wisdom. Not the certainty that you are right, but the courage to act despite uncertainty, and the willingness to accept responsibility for the outcome. The strange room began to stabilize. The overlapping timelines collapsed into a single reality. The fourth trial is complete. You have learned that leadership is not about making perfect choices. It is about making necessary ones. A new door appeared. This one was different. It pulsed with energy that made the air shimmer. 3 trials remain, the curator said. But I must warn you, the next trial has broken more species than any other. It tests not your mind or your morality, but your will to continue when all hope seems lost. Minho looked at his team. They were tired, emotionally drained from the weight of their decisions, but their eyes still held determination. We have come too far to stop now, he said. Hyun agreed. Whatever comes next, we face it together. They stepped through the door into the trial that had defeated countless species before them. They did not know what waited on the other side, but they knew they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, with honesty about the difficulty, with acceptance of responsibility, and with the determination to keep going no matter what. That was the human way. It always had been. The 5th room was darkness. Not just the absence of light. Something worse. The absence of meaning. The 5 humans floated in emptiness where time did not pass, where space had no size, where existence itself seemed like a lie. The curator's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. 5th trial. You now experience what every species faces eventually. The crushing weight of being insignificant in the cosmos. In the vastness of the universe, your lives mean nothing. Your civilization means nothing. Your entire species is less than a grain of sand on an infinite beach. Your sun will die. Your worlds will turn to dust. Your names will be forgotten. In the end, nothing you do matters. The universe will continue, not caring whether you ever existed. Knowing this, why keep going? Why struggle? Why continue? The darkness pressed in. With it came visions. They saw Earth from far away, a blue ball shrinking to a dot of light then disappearing. They saw humanity's greatest buildings crumble to nothing. They saw the death of the universe when even the stars would burn out and everything would be cold and dark forever. Jiwon felt her mind struggling. She had navigated empty space between stars. But this was different. This was the emptiness between meaning and meaninglessness. She whispered into the void, I have mapped dark space. I have seen the gaps between stars where nothing exists. But I kept mapping because someone needed to know what was out there. Even if it did not matter to the universe, it mattered to us. Daeho tried to find logic. We build homes knowing they will fall apart. We make stations knowing they will decay. But we build them anyway because future generations need places to live. We do not build for forever. We build for tomorrow. Yuna thought of all the life she had studied. Every organism I have cataloged will go extinct someday. Every ecosystem will collapse eventually, but each one is beautiful while it exists. Meaning does not need to last forever. It just needs to exist now. Minho felt the darkness pushing on his mind. I have trained my whole life to protect people. People who will die anyway. Worlds that will crumble anyway. But the fight still matters. Not because it changes the universe, but because it changes us. Hyun listened to his team fighting against the emptiness. He understood. The curator is right. Nothing we do matters to the universe. The universe does not care. It cannot care. It is not capable of caring. He pushed his voice into the darkness, not with anger, but with quiet strength. But we care. That is what makes us different from the void. We can look at infinity and choose to give it meaning. We can stare into the darkness and decide to light a candle anyway, knowing the candle will burn out. Hyun continued. We keep going not because it matters to the universe, but because it matters to us. Because persistence itself fights against meaninglessness. Every kindness, every discovery, every act of creation is us saying to the void that we choose to exist. To struggle, to matter to each other. The darkness began to fade, not disappearing but becoming less heavy. In its place, a room of crystal light appeared. The curator appeared, completely solid now. It looked almost human. 3,000 years. 3,000 years of species reaching this point and failing. The Aurum, who could move through time, saw that all action was pointless and chose to stop existing. The Gentari, with their connected minds, decided that if the universe did not care, individual existence was meaningless. But you understood something they did not. Meaning is not built into the universe. Meaning is something life creates, something consciousness forces onto existence. It is perhaps the greatest rebellion against entropy. The crystal room shifted. The humans could suddenly see what the testing station truly was. Not just a place for tests, but a container where raw material was transformed into something refined. 2 trials remain, the curator said. Trial 6 is about sacrifice. Trial 7 is about transcendence. Few species have reached this point. None have passed beyond it. A door appeared. Through it, they could see a room where each of them would face their deepest fear and make their ultimate choice. Yuna spoke what everyone felt. Sacrifice. That means one or more of us might not leave this place. Minho's voice was grim. The trial does not care about individuals. It cares about the species. If humanity passing means some of us stay here forever. He did not finish. He did not need to. Hyun looked at each team member. They had proven humanity capable of resourcefulness, cooperation, self-reflection, handling consequences, and persistence. They had shown that humans could learn, grow, and continue despite impossible odds. Whatever happens in there, he said, remember why we came. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because humanity needed to know if we were capable of more than just survival. We needed to know if we could truly live among the stars. Daiho smiled despite the serious moment. We have already proven that. The question now is whether we can prove it 2 more times. The 5 humans stood before the door. Beyond it were tests that had broken civilizations. But they knew something those civilizations might not have understood. They did not have to be perfect. They just had to be human, and that had been enough so far. Together they walked through the door into the 6th trial. The room separated them, each person alone. Before Hyun appeared a mirror showing not his reflection but his deepest truth. He saw himself as a child on Earth before he joined the space program, knowing he would leave his family forever. The mirror asked him if it was worth it. Each team member faced their own mirror, their own ghosts. Minho saw soldiers he had led who died. Yuna saw ecosystems she had changed. Daeho saw his structures as future ruins. Jiwon saw ships that followed her maps and never returned. One by one they answered. Yes, it was worth it. Not because the sacrifice did not hurt, but because what they gained gave the pain meaning. They accepted the cost without denying it. They took responsibility without collapsing under the weight. The mirrors shattered. They stood together again. The curator appeared, now made of pure light. You passed the 6th trial, not by denying the cost of your choices, but by accepting that cost and choosing to continue. This is true sacrifice. Not dramatic gestures, but quiet persistence while carrying burdens. The room expanded into a map of the entire universe. Every star, every galaxy, every possible future spread around them. 1 trial remains. Trial 7. What will humanity become? They saw futures where humans became machines, Futures where they merged with aliens. Futures where they stayed human. Futures as warriors, as philosophers, as scientists. Every possibility stretched before them. Hyun understood. The point is not to choose one future. It is to choose all of them. To accept that humanity will evolve in countless directions. The others agreed. Transcendence was not about becoming something else. It was about accepting constant change and growth. Enabling all futures. Giving humanity freedom to explore every possibility. The curator became solid and human-looking. 3,000 years ago, I stood where you stand. I was human once. Part of the first species to complete all 7 trials. We built this place not as a test, but as a teaching tool. You are the second to pass. Now you choose. Return to your people or stay here as curators. The answer was obvious. We return, Hyun said. Our people need what we learned. The curator nodded with something like pride. Then go. Show your people that humanity transcended the trials. You proved that a young species can stand alongside the eldest races. As they faded back to reality, the curator spoke once more. Every species failed the test, except yours. You won not through superior power. You won by being adaptable, cooperative, self-aware, responsible, persistent, and willing to sacrifice. Those qualities will serve humanity well. They appeared back on their ship. Captain Hyun looked at the station, now distant. They carried knowledge that would transform humanity's place in the galaxy. Every species failed the test, Hyun said quietly. Minho smiled slightly. Humans just kept winning, not through strength, not through destiny, but through simple, stubborn refusal to give up. In the end, that made all the difference.